So in this video, what we'd like to do is work through a particular example. What we're going to do is this example here, where you create an array and you use it from a collection of values, and we'll do something with it. We'll have a very simple mechanism of what we can do with it. And we'll do that as an example, as a worked example, and talk through the concept. So let's create a new project. And I'm going through this deliberately. Remember, you must have a project JDK. You don't have to check anything else. Select create project. Now, if you've already got a command line app, then make sure that this is correctly named. So these are array lectures. I'm going to call them. The base package is my files. Let's just go on into there. Right, so here we go. Back to let's open up our project folder. Is the src, which has the folder called your base package, and in there is my main. I'm going to refactor that because I find it just not the best naming convention. So you go to wherever it is, refactor by right clicking it. It lets me, there we go, and click on rename, and then I'm going to just call it program. Press enter. So I have that set up there. Now I've done that in previous weeks. So what you should notice, if you just rename it, the file name won't be changed, and this name over here, it'll all go out of sync. So you must follow the procedure of a refactor rename. The concept of refactoring is actually quite an important one when you get further involved in programming. So let's very, very briefly, that's our example. What we're going to do is we're going to create that, and then we're going to see how to print each item from this array using a loop. Okay, so the sample code is already in the sheet, but it's very, very important that we work through the example and you code at the same time. So the very first thing I really want to do is write out my array. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Java, it's probably a good idea to get into the habit. Now, if you've installed tab 9, then you'll notice it gives you more options of code completion. And when we need it, I'll show you. So it gives me this new int. Now we'll come back to that in the next video, where we're creating an array in a different way. We don't need it here. So what we're doing is just declaring an array, an integer array, in that way. We use that squiggly bracket. Let's put the semicolon at the end, and let's give it a collection of values. Okay, so do the same thing. You notice I've just done a simple error. I've not put commas in, I've put full stops in. Let's go back through and then press enter. Now that simply creates a populated an array, an integer array from a collection. Now the next bit of code, I want to just talk through the way that it's built, and then we'll code it. Okay, so let's just get a fresh sheet of paper and just look at how the syntax. Now I'm hoping, are familiar with looping by now. This is called a counter based. We are going to use what's called a counter based loop. And the idea is that each item in your array has an index position, and we're going to use that to pull it out and print it. Okay. So how do we actually set up that type of array? Well, you can type this yourself. I'll do this in a moment. You use the for statement, open a single bracket, close that bracket, create a squiggly bracket, and press enter, which should create a closed squiggly bracket. So you should have that as a pair. Now in here, we're going to put some information. Okay, but that's the basic structure of it. So the basic structure works in the way that here we put 3 important pieces of information which control the loop, and between these 2 points inside here, let's use a different color. In here, we have the code we are executing every loop, okay, through each repetition. Now, what's important to note is that obviously with a counter, let's say that we're going to set up a counter called I. We set it to 0. We give it a limit, a condition to make sure it loops, and we say every time we loop, how many times, what are we going to increase it by? So we have these different aspects. There's a lot more going on there. We'll actually code that. But let's say that we get this I. So what that means that inside the loop, I can do stuff with that I. If I use the value I inside this loop, every time it goes round, it will give me the latest value of it as it loops round. It's in this example, it's going to increase by 1. So that's the basic concept. Let's code it. So as I said, it's for open a bracket, close bracket, squiggly bracket, close. Notice it creates that bare structure, and into there I'm going to create my condition. So I'm going to set up an index. I'm going to call it index in this. Now, if you've got tab 9, what's really nice about tab 9 is that it fills out all the rest of it. What it actually says, it spots, it's using artificial intelligence, this code completion. It recognizes in the line above you have an integer array. So what it's automatically done is it's helped populate, in this one here, it's completely given you all the pieces you need. You declare your index, semicolon, you set the limit of when to stop. So if this is true, if the index is smaller than the length of the array, that's what that part there means, then it will carry on looping. And then every time it loops, the plus plus means it goes up by 1. The advantage for you using this kind of code completion is you can just select it and it fills it in for you and saves you typing issues, saves you issues with error in code. Of course, you could just straight away copy and paste it out of my lecture notes. There's no advantage to you just simply copying and pasting. At least with code completion, you have to see which is the right way to complete the code. So let's just be absolutely clear how the 3 parts work inside here. Okay, part number 1, when you have your for statement. Okay, so the conditions are part number 1, you declare your variable. Okay, so I'm just for this example, and then you put a semicolon. Part number 2 is the looping condition, loop condition. Okay, and that says that if I is less than, and the array is called int array, and if you press dot, you'll get the length of the array. So that's the second piece, and this is the increment. The third piece is the increment, the step, what you might call the step. Okay, and the step simply says plus plus semicolon. So what it means is that that's the looping counter, that's the loop condition, as long as it's less than the length. And the third part is it will step only 1 at a time. If I wanted a different step, I would change that. If I wanted a different condition, and so on. Right, now I put it in 3 separate lines here. Have a look. That's the first bit, semicolon. That's the second bit, semicolon. That's the third bit. Okay, so now I have in this example here an index. We know how to print out, but I'm going to introduce a helper function. So if I click at the edge of this static void main, if I click that yellow, that will show me where the end of that method is, right? If I just open up a bit of space here and I create public static void, which means it's part of this interface. Don't worry about the details too much. And if I call it print and I pass it in the square brackets a string, and I call it, let's just call it str for short, open the squiggly bracket, close the squiggly bracket, and in here if I type in system, now here we go, tab 9 has very helpfully shown me which one I want. I want not system out print line, I actually want to print out the parameter. So if I click that, the AI engine knows that I'm trying to print out what I pass it. So this is the parameter I pass it, and this is it printing. Why have I done that? In fact, it's even neater if you put it all in one line, and this is one of the advantages. What is the advantage of having just done that? Let's squeeze it all into one line. Well, in here I have 2 options. I could just type in system.out. If I can type system.out, I've got to make sure my capitalization is right. System.out, print line, and so on, right? That's lengthy. But now I've created this useful helper function called print. I pass it the string it needs to print, oops, pass it the string, and inside it, it will run the system out print line. So in here, to save me code, I just use it, print. So what am I actually going to print inside this? What am I going to pass it? Well, I actually want to know what that, each number one at a time, I want to print them out. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll do a simple version. I'll get you to go back through the lecture notes to do more. How do I select each item from the index? Now I'm going to write this as a line of code, but you don't have to. If I pick the item, if I pick an integer, an item from the index, this is how I do it. I use the index with a square bracket immediately after the name of the array and pass it to this temporary variable called item, and I'm going to print item. Of course, you can just pass that straight into here, into the print statement, but the advantage is you can see the concept that I'm doing here, right? So declare it, create a loop, print each item as we go. Let's go up to the top, let's run it, let's have a quick look. And it does take a little bit of time, so be patient. Okay, very usefully, it spotted a typo. It's saying that a semicolon was wanted. I click on the link, takes me to the line where the error is, and I can correct it, right? Now, it's very important you use the environment to help you. So look at the errors, don't run to remember there is something here. Now, this is an interesting one. Int cannot be converted to a string. Now that print statement requires a string, and I'm passing it an integer. So here we encounter one of the issues with data types and integers. Now, how do I get this integer value as a string? Well, there's several different ways. Sometimes if you press dot, you have, in some languages, an option to convert it to a string. In here, we have an option called value of, and we can do that and put a bracket round it. Okay, so we can put the value of in here, but let's just write the concept out. What we're going to say is we're going to say string, and if you notice there is a line down here which says string value of item. That line of code, if I click on it, that little piece here will convert an integer into a string. So when I pass it to the print statement, it comes as a string. Might seem really unnecessarily complicated, but it's crucial to making your code work. So let's just draw that concept as clearly as possible. So what we're saying is that if I have an integer, and let's say my integer is that, and it's holding a value 0, and I want to print it, okay, and my print statement is this helper function, which is essentially a helper function to carry out the line system out print as we've got in the code. If I try to just drop that straight into here, into the print statement, it can't, because this is expecting a string. So what we can have, and I'm just going to create an intermediate line of code, is if I declare a string, let's just call it S, I use the capital string dot value of, let's get the syntax right. It is a capital O, notice, for value of, okay? And then in there, I put my integer, semicolon, I can do that. So there's an integer, it pops into here. This bit converts it to a string, stores the string of it in there, and then that drops into here. It's very, very important set of procedures. What you'll find with Java is that you have to be very conscious of data types. Remember what I said to you at the beginning. So we've done that. Let's run it. I've done it in a single line. I haven't created a separate line, but I will do just so you can see what I'm talking about. If I hit dot value of, tab 9 very helpfully lets me see that. Then I'm just going to print S. Okay, so that replicates what I have. Let's hit the run. Let's see what it does. And there we go. It's outputted 11, 82, 83, and as you can see, it's just outputted in each turn of the loop, each of the items. If you wanted to add some more information into there, go and have a look at the lecture slides and then work through the examples.